When I Love Lucy first flickered onto American screens in 1951, it didn't just create laughter, it created an entire language for it. Red hair, black and white film, frantic slapstick, and a rhythm of dialogue that would shape sitcom timing for generations. But behind Lucille Ball's spectacular overreactions stood another performance equally crucial and harder to live: Vivian Vance, the talented stage actress who transformed the neighbor wife archetype into a real, breathing human being. The world knew her as Ethel Mertz, frumpy, loyal, comically exasperated. The truth, as Vance revealed over later decades, and especially in the reflective interviews before her death in 1979, was that playing Ethel required balancing affection and frustration toward the role, toward Hollywood's gender expectations, and occasionally toward her beloved, formidable co-star. Born Vivian Roberta Jones in Cherryvale, Kansas, in 1909, she grew up with a voice that refused to stay small. Singing in church choirs led to repertory theater, then to Broadway by her early 30s. She had the timing of a comedian but the yearning of a dramatic actress. New York critics predicted serious roles ahead, not the baggy house dresses Ethel would one day animate. When she crossed paths with Desi Arnaz's production team in 1951, desperation intersected with opportunity. CBS and the Arnazes were building a new sort of sitcom based on Lucy and Desi's real marriage, and they needed a foil, someone bright enough to spar with Lucy Ricardo yet grounded enough to make her antics plausible. Vance almost didn't take the gig. At 42, she worried that a television sitcom might shrink her theater credibility. Money was scarce, though, and Desi Arnaz had seen her stage work. He believed she could anchor the chaos. Her audition, witnesses recalled, consisted of one line delivered with weary hilarity. "Fred." It was enough. Lucille Ball allegedly turned to Arnaz and said, "That's Ethel." No one could know that the chemistry between the two women would both electrify and exhaust them for the rest of their lives. On set, Vance quickly learned that sitcom success demanded repetition bordering on ritual. Each live studio episode functioned like a short stage play filmed before an audience, meaning that the cast rehearsed all week, shot in sequence, then performed under merciless scrutiny. Ball, the show's perfectionist core, demanded precision, a professional instinct forged by years in radio and film. Vance, trained in theater improvisation, responded instinctively rather than mechanically. Their methods collided beautifully on camera, but sometimes bruised off camera. Lucy liked to rehearse like a ballet, Vance later recalled. "I liked to rehearse like a jazz musician." Their eventual compromise produced the show's rhythm, order meeting spontaneity. Still, the actress never entirely reconciled herself to Ethel's dowdy image. Makeup artists added padding that distorted her naturally slim figure, and wardrobe designers aged her a decade to emphasize contrast with glamorous Lucy. Privately she chafed, publicly she smiled. One oft-retold story describes her balking at the first fitting for Ethel's shapeless dresses. Costume designer Alois Jenkins remembered Vance protesting, "But Ethel's supposed to be real, not ridiculous." Lucille Ball reportedly backed Jenkins, saying the visual contrast was essential to the humor. Vance capitulated, but years later she admitted the compromise stung. Every actress wants to be funny, but none wants to be invisible. It was one of many truths she revealed late in life. Honest, not bitter, acknowledging that brilliance sometimes means self-erasure. The professional hierarchy of I Love Lucy added tension to affection. Ball and Arnaz, who jointly owned Desilu Productions, held full creative control, while Vance and William Frawley, Fred Mertz, were contract players. Frawley, 30 years older than Vance and possessing a famously caustic wit, clashed with her from the outset. Their on-screen marriage looked gruff but endearing. Off-screen it often oscillated between silence and sarcasm. He mocked her age and energy. She called him an old poop, not always joking. Personal animosity, mirrored through comedic alchemy, became the texture that audiences adored without realizing its authenticity. Late in life, Vance would chuckle when asked about Frawley. He was what he was, half of why the jokes landed. Her partnership with Ball, by contrast, evolved into genuine sisterhood, constructed over mutual wars with perfectionism. Ball championed Vance's comedic brilliance, while Vance tempered Ball's severity with empathy. Lucille was demanding, but she wanted excellence for all of us, Vance said years later. Their dialogues range from timing to marriage, from craft to exhaustion. Between filming Lucy does a television commercial and job switching. Episodes now legendary. It was Vance who encouraged Ball to embrace physical exaggeration while keeping heart at the center. They learned to trust the camera's unblinking fairness. Whatever truth existed between them off-screen translated into magic on-screen. To the public, I Love Lucy distilled post-war domestic fantasy. A beautiful wife, a patient husband, a neighborly couple next door. Behind the laughter, the actors carried real human burdens. Desi Arnaz wrestled alcoholism. Ball braved sexism and anxiety, overproducing while raising children. Frawley managed deteriorating health. Vance fought chronic depression and self-doubt. She hid it with professionalism, then unpacked it later in interviews, explaining that laughter was both shield and remedy. "What saved me," she once said, "was that Ethel always got the last laugh about real life. I wanted women watching at home to see that you could be sane in a crazy house." By 1957, after 6 seasons and countless reruns, I Love Lucy metamorphosed into the Lucy Desi comedy hour. The workload intensified even as relationships frayed. Vance hesitated to sign on, aware of how decades playing a secondary housewife could trap her career. Yet loyalty won. She rejoined for 3 more years, and by extension bore witness to the disintegration of Lucy and Desi's marriage. "We were all divorcing in different ways," she later reflected. The remark, half wistful, half wry, summed up the psychic fatigue of teen performers aging into their own myths. Through all the strain, Vance endured as the show's moral compass. Ethel Mertz functioned as America's first televised confidant, delivering humor rooted in honesty rather than caricature. For the millions of women who tuned in, she was an equal partner in mischief, not a subordinate. That nuance, much of it improvised or argued into being by Vance, would later redefine the sitcom best friend template, direct ancestors to the Golden Girls, Laverne and Shirley, and the confidants populating Friends. Vance saw this clearly even in her final years. "Ethel changed television without anyone noticing," she told a reporter in the 1970s. "She showed you could be plain and still powerful." By the time her career wound through later collaborations with Ball in The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy, her body of work had shifted from mere comic relief to cultural infrastructure. The truth she revealed privately, and only began articulating publicly before her death, was that no amount of fame could simplify that duality. Gratitude for collaboration, pain at invisibility, joy at friendship forged in perfectionism. Behind both laughter and legacy stood a woman who had dared to make imperfection heroic. When I Love Lucy ended, Vivian Vance found herself in that uncomfortable no man's land that every beloved sidekick eventually faces, the gratitude of the audience colliding with the industry's limited imagination. Viewers couldn't unsee Ethel Mertz. Casting directors couldn't picture anything else. For a performer who had come of age playing Shakespearean heroines and torch song leads, it felt like being pinned behind glass. "Once the audience loves you as a character, she becomes your twin," Vance told a friend. "You adore her, but she won't move out of the house." The Lucy Desi comedy hour kept her visible through the late 1950s, yet Vance yearned for variety. Broadway called again with the voice of the Turtle and regional theater tours that reminded her what acting without a laugh track felt like. She thrived on the immediacy of stagecraft, the give and take with live audiences that had first sharpened her instincts. But traveling also highlighted how intertwined her public identity was with Lucille Ball's. At stage doors, fans often greeted her not as Vivian Vance, but as Mrs. Mertz. She came to accept the attention politely, sometimes wistfully, signing "Best wishes, Vivian Vance, Ethel," to bridge the gap between gratitude and self-respect. Then, halfway through the 1960s, destiny and loyalty intertwined once more. Lucille Ball, now divorced from Desi Arnaz and running Desilu Productions alone, was launching a new sitcom, The Lucy Show. She wanted her old partner. Vance hesitated. "As much as I loved Lucy, I had to decide whether Ethel could survive in another neighborhood," she explained years later. Eventually, she joined, this time as Vivian Bagley, not Ethel, a single working woman, child included, far from Fred Mertz's apartment building. The role allowed her to modernize herself, while maintaining the chemistry audiences craved. Reviewers noticed the change immediately. Same humor, freer spirit. It was Vance who quietly insisted that her character be unmarried and independent. Women were changing, she remarked, and so should television. On paper, the Lucy show repeated the old formula. Two friends muddling through misadventures, but underneath it reflected social progress, disguised as slapstick. Vance's portrayal of a divorced mother on network TV, still rare in 1962, signaled trust in viewers' maturity. The partnership flourished another 3 seasons until the wear and tear of weekly production and Vance's Kansas heart demanded slower pace. She asked to work part-time from the East Coast. Near her third husband, literary agent John Doddsball refused at first, but relented with affection, telling her, "Viv, I want you to be happy, even if it breaks my heart." Vance exited in 1965, gracefully ending one of television's most successful duos. They didn't fight. They simply recognized exhaustion dressed as loyalty. The years that followed were both tranquil and challenging. Freed from weekly tapings, Vance toured dinner theaters across the country, occasionally stealing scenes in guest roles. She directed amateur productions in Connecticut and supported young performers, counseling them about discipline and self-belief. Those who met her later described her as warm yet exacting. "She'd hug you after giving notes sharper than glass," one student recalled. Television occasionally lured her back, guest spots on Here's Lucy and variety specials that capitalized on nostalgia. Off-camera, friendship between the two Lucys deepened past show business. They vacationed together, traded late-night phone calls, navigated divorces and remarriages. Vance once said she and Ball were bound by timing. She'd set it up, I'd knock it down, in jokes and in life. Portraits of Ball's Beverly Hills home still show photos of the pair arm in arm. The laughter of those sessions made it into neither scripts nor tabloids. It'd be why the late 1970s Vance's health began to fail. After years of uneasy symptoms, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, then metastasis. She and Dodds withdrew to their Belvedere, California, home, where friends noticed a serenity bordering on theatrical grace. She continued to receive visitors, fellow actors, writers, even devoted fans who mailed flowers she insisted be sent onward to local hospitals. Declining strength didn't halt humor. She kept calling her old collaborator. Lucille Ball later recounted visiting her in 1979. "She looked beautiful, like always. She told me, 'You were the best partner a girl ever had.' We just held hands." Ball would describe that visit as one of the most haunting gifts of her life. Within months, Vivian Vance was gone at 70. Shortly before her death, she had spoken to biographers compiling histories of I Love Lucy. What she revealed wasn't shocking gossip, but wisdom distilled from years inside Hollywood machinery. Her truth was pragmatic yet touching. That television's first great female duo succeeded because two women trusted one another to take turns shining. "Lucille had the drive," Vance said. "I had the permission to laugh at it. Together we made honesty funny." She also acknowledged scars, artistic envy, enforced frumpiness, endless retakes, but never rancor. "We fought for timing, not spotlight," she insisted. In an era when actresses were framed as rivals, their partnership modeled equality by accident. One played the dreamer, the other grounded her. Without Ethel's pragmatic warmth, Lucy's chaos would have rung hollow. The press, hungry for salacious revelations, missed the deeper revelation she offered, that behind the impeccable comedy was discipline merciless enough to break weaker spirits. Ball and Arnaz filmed with military precision. One missed cue meant resetting an elaborate camera arrangement. Vivian Vance endured it all with professionalism partly rooted in gratitude. I Love Lucy had made her a household name and ensured financial security unknown to most actresses of her generation. When asked if the fame was worth the strain, she answered simply, "I wouldn't trade a single laugh." Private letters found later echoed that sentiment, adding nuance. In 1978, she wrote to a niece, "Everyone asks for secrets, but the real secret is that we were terrified of failing each week. That fear kept the work honest." It's an insight that reveals the fragility beneath vintage laughter. Two women realizing, week after week, that comedy depended upon vulnerability disguised as chaos. Vance recognized that courage more clearly than anyone else. During one of her last taped appearances on a talk show, when asked what she wanted people to remember, she smiled. That I worked with the best, loved them dearly, and didn't waste the laughter. The studio audience applauded, perhaps not realizing the goodbye embedded in her phrasing. She confided to friends later that night. I hope they see I wasn't Ethel all the way through. I was a woman who liked Ethel's hearts, not her dresses. She died with that humor intact. Today, her story reads as the hidden chapter of television's golden age. Talent overshadowed by character, intelligence masked as comic relief, an artist who found transcendence inside limitation. The truth Vivian Vance left behind is not an exposé, but a philosophy. Joy is serious work, and respect, the unseen rhythm of every double act, is harder to choreograph than laughter. The story didn't end with Vivian Vance's passing. It echoed through every sitcom that followed. Lucille Ball, who rarely spoke publicly about grief, admitted that losing Viv felt like losing half her rhythm. For nearly 30 years they had worked by instinct, breathing in unison across punchlines, often finishing one another's adjustments before the director could call cut. After 1979, Ball kept that rhythm alive by memory. When I rehearse, she confessed to an interviewer, I still wait for her laugh in the wings. It was the sound that had once anchored Lucy Ricardo's wild plans, a friend's laughter doubling his conscience. A few months after the funeral, Ball established a small scholarship fund for aspiring stage actors, specifying that recipients must combine comedy with compassion. That phrase summed up Vivian Vance's gift. She had fused wit with warmth, never mocking, merely mirroring the absurdities of ordinary life. Younger comedians began citing her Ethel Mertz as blueprint, someone who could be exasperated yet affectionate, weary yet wise. No Ethel, no Rhoda, no Dorothy Zbornak, no Pam Beasley. The lineage traces straight back to the Kansas-born actress who made self-deprecation the most dignified laugh in the room. Historians exploring television's early years often remark how revolutionary I Love Lucy was for women, but rarely mention that its feminism ran quietly through Vance's performance. She embodied solidarity, mocking Lucy's chaos while protecting her from humiliation. That coded empathy redefined the trope of the female straight man. Late in life, she described it this way. Ethel may roll her eyes, but she never rolls them against Lucy. She rolls them for the audience, so they know women see through nonsense and still love anyway. Those sentences, preserved in biographer Frank Kistell's research, articulate what Vance meant by truth, that comedy built on kindness endures longer than sarcasm. Lucille Ball carried that ideal into every later project. Here's Lucy occasionally referenced Ethel by name. Crew veterans noticed that Ball would pause before those mentions, as if honoring a silent cue. In private conversations with students at her acting workshops, she extolled Vance's professionalism. No one protected me like Viv. She made me brave enough to fail in front of millions. When Ball accepted a Lifetime Achievement Award in 1986, she dedicated it to all the Ethels in the world who make Lucy's possible. It was the most public acknowledgement of a creative debt America had already sensed, but never formally named. Meanwhile, television evolved. The archetype of female friendship moved from domestic kitchens to urban apartments, but its DNA stayed pure. Contrast and camaraderie merging into chemistry. Scholars documenting the genealogy of on-screen partnerships cite Vance as the first credible best friend, a performative mixture of competence and vulnerability that audiences instantly trusted. Unlike comic foils before her, she wasn't a clown but an anchor. By standing on equal comic footing with the star, she shifted power dynamics not only between characters but between actresses. She had demanded equal story weight decades before ensemble casts became industry vocabulary. Her personal story also inspired later conversations about mental health in the entertainment world. After her death, letters between Vance and fellow stage performer Tennessee Williams surfaced, gentle exchanges about anxiety, exhaustion, and the sustaining role of humor. They reveal an artist profoundly aware of show business's emotional toll. One line, written in 1977, distills her compassion. I learned from laughter that despair gets embarrassed and leaves the room. That humane pragmatism influenced generations of comics who turned pain into grace. Carol Burnett, Lily Tomlin, Whoopi Goldberg. all citing Vance and Ball as their compass points. Although I Love Lucy reruns never faded from syndication, rediscovery of Vance's independence accelerated with the rise of women's studies scholarship in the 1990s. Writers reframed the Ethel character as covert feminist iconography. She earned household authority through competence, she negotiated friendship instead of obedience, and she displayed body positivity decades before the phrase existed. Students analyzing gender and comedy began pairing Vance alongside giants like Lucille Ball, Eve Arden, and Donna Reed, equal partners, not sidekicks. In that academic resurrection, the truth she articulated privately, wanting to be plain and still powerful, finally received its cultural due for viewers worldwide. However, the most touching legacy came from Lucille Ball herself. During an interview on The Merv Griffin Show in 1980, Ball fought tears reminiscing about their friendship. Viv made the work mean more than laughter. We trusted each other completely. You can't fake that. Her voice cracked. It was perhaps the only time the queen of television comedy ran out of timing. The moment demonstrated how deeply Vance's influence extended beyond punchlines to the very soul of collaboration. Even decades later, documentaries returned to their partnership as the gold standard for comedic chemistry. Every split-second glance exchange between Lucy and Ethel carried not just timing, but emotional truth learned through shared vulnerability. What would Vivian Vance make of her enduring significance? Those close to her believed she'd chuckle at the attention, then deflect it. In old interviews, she insisted she had no gospel to preach except professionalism. Yet her actions contradicted that modesty, advocating for better working conditions for female crew members, supporting local theater programs, writing checks quietly to women's shelters long before celebrity philanthropy was fashionable. Her advocacy flowed from the same impulse that animated Ethel Mertz, a belief that compassion, even when invisible, is revolutionary. Visitors to her hometown of Cherryvale today find a small plaque outside the historical museum honoring the town's most famous daughter. It quotes one of her lesser-known remarks, given during a 1977 radio appearance. Everyone loved Lucy, but Lucy's laughter came through Ethel. Maybe that's my job, to be how laughter travels. Those words encapsulate the whole story she spent a lifetime hinting at. The invisible conduit making joy possible for others. Far from regretting the supporting role, she pictured it as essential artistry. Therein lies the real truth she revealed before her death. Not confessions of feud or bitterness, but the simple recognition that artistry sometimes looks like humility, and friendship sometimes means standing just out of the spotlight so someone else can shine. Vivian Vance understood that kind of love, both comedic and human. Her life corrected a misconception still common in entertainment, that visibility equals value. Ethel Mertz, and the woman who gave her life, proved the opposite. Invisibility, when chosen in love, can illuminate an entire era. When Lucille Ball herself passed away a decade later, journalists replayed that handshake at Vance's bedside from 1979, a silent contract of affection sealed by laughter. Two women who had once rehearsed timing down to the millisecond had timed their goodbye perfectly, too. Between them lingered the rhythm that built modern comedy. Setup, punchline, friendship, truth. And so the light above 623 East 68th Street, the Ricardo's fictional apartment, still flickers in syndication, reminding audiences that somewhere behind Lucy's sparkle, Ethel Mertz steadied the laughter with heart. Vivian Vance's truth wasn't scandal. It was grace under humor, discipline wrapped in empathy, a manual for partnership that remains television's quiet miracle. Every time Lucy trips, the world still laughs. Every time Ethel helps her back up, it learns why. That was, and is, Vivian Vance's enduring confession. That kindness is the most revolutionary punchline of all.